Hello, everyone. My name is Ariel Starbird. I'm a holistic health and fitness coach in New York City. This is the Spirit Warrior Wisdom podcast, where we discussed how we can use military strategy and martial arts philosophy in pro-social ways to build and guide society toward enlightenment. And today I have with me Peter Liston, who is an Army veteran and a serial entrepreneur in Australia. He is the co-founder of Trust the Process, Australia's leading process and systems developers for small business. And Peter, feel free to add whatever else you think is important in your story.
G'day, Ariel. I have to do the g'day thing, like it's like being in Texas, you got to say, how are you, partner? Well, I got to do the g'day thing from as an Australian. But it's lovely to be here and have a chat with you today.
Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, so a trusted process, basically we help people systemize, automate, and delegate. So that's all about having good processes in your business, finding the right tech platforms to help have visibility and control. And the delegate bit is we help businesses find great offshore talent to help grow, and help their business owners really elevate, what they do in their daily lives by finding good talent all around the world to fit into their businesses.
Excellent. So do you have clients all over the world?
Yeah, we do. So apart from obviously here in Australia, which is the bread and butter of what we do, but we've got clients in London, Dubai, South Africa, and to be honest, probably 70% of our growth is coming from the United States at the moment. I guess the United States is just such a powerhouse, the land of milk and honey when it comes to economy and economic power. So yeah, we just get lots of work out of the US.
That's fantastic. So you're an Army veteran and you
Mm.
have your own podcast where you're talking about military strategy for business, which is something I was actually looking for years. I just didn't even I didn't know how to phrase that question. And then I found it. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I'm interested in. So tell me, why is military strategy relevant for building businesses, relationships, building networks, and as well as personal development, like self-motivation, drive, and focus?
I think when it comes down to it, is I learnt so much being part of the military. So I was in the Australian Army for around 11 or so years. I went to what's called the Royal Military College Duntroon, which is, I believe, West Point would be the US example. So I had the pleasure and real honor of commanding soldiers all across the world, including on operations in places like East Timor and Afghanistan. But for me, I was just fascinated by how the military gets complex things done and how it moves and drives people to achieve common goals. And on reflection, unfortunately, warfare is probably the most studied thing the human race has ever done. From as we've been always been in some state of conflict between some person or some group, and from an academic or a scholastic perspective, there is an intense amount of learning and education that goes into the profession of arms. So for me, being able to take some of these principles and applying them into business is just being able to take that learning and sharing it with others.
Very interesting. What would you say is the number one thing that you're taking out of your experience in the military that like every day you're applying business? It's just critical.
Just getting things done, just understanding what needs to be done and getting that thing done.
Productivity.
So it is, yeah, the relentless drive to achieve things and to not let things get in your way and to just basically find the next problem and solve it.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that because in my 20s I built my business from scratch and I was trying to hire young Americans, and that's the one thing they didn't have. They had ideas, they were creative, they were sensitive. Drive they did not have. And so it didn't work out, obviously, because I always had a lot of drive. So but yeah, I totally see what you're saying. So another question I have for you is, so a lot of small businesses, they start because someone has a passion for something, willing to devote their life to it, endure sleepless nights, maybe sleeping in a car, even tough beginnings. And in my case, it was health and fitness. That's my absolute passion and love. But for some people, it could be art, music, or sports, or business, or farming, or environment, other sports, who knows, or preserving a family legacy, whatever it may be. Um, However, when you start to grow a business, you need profit and a lot of it. Otherwise, you just can't grow. and also to deal with crises. Crises will come up, and you need money for that. So must profit trump love in business to succeed long term, or should passion still stay first and profit after, or does it, does it matter what kind of business it is?
Really cool question. And I guess that comes down to maybe a personal thing. So for me, a business that is profitable allows you to do the thing that you love. And sometimes so you need to be resilient. You need to be sustainable as a business. You need to be able to have an enduring function or an enduring entity that can continue to deliver your effect on the world. So it you and the more profit you have, the more the way you can express what you're doing. So I sort of see it in two ways. Like to have an effect on the world, we can either take the Mother Teresa kind of approach, through full service uh, and she was amazing. Like she helped thousands in the way that she delivered that, but from a place of how do I say this? She put herself into that situation and just delivered it through poverty. The way that I want to look at business though is, I have a family and I love to travel the world, and I want to be able to, be able to have an effect on the world through a place of profitability in a business, because that just means I'm going to be able to share a lot more of what we're doing. So, for example, in Trust the Process at the moment, we've got around 200 Filipinos work in companies all around the world, and we're very passionate about, through our entity and through our vessel, being able to help them achieve their personal goals. And that's only just starting. We want to hit 1,000, supporting 1,000 people with jobs over the next 2 years.
I see. So, well, it kind of sounds like it sounds like you're saying profit has to come first, but I don't know if you explicitly
Mm.
said that. I would, maybe the image that I'm seeing is the vehicle is profit, but the driver is the love.
Yeah, that's correct. I wouldn't say, and you can't sacrifice one over the other. Well, actually, I'll take that back. A lot of people do. A lot of people have profit as their driver, and for those people, that's each into their own and what they do. But for the way I see business is, it is a balance between what you love to do versus having an entity that is sustainable to keep doing it. So I feel that there is a little bit of give and take in terms of that answer. I think without the passion, then does the profit mean anything? Um, but without the profit, you can't deliver the passion.
I totally see your point. So my other question is regarding archetype. Like everybody is driven by some archetype, and an archetype is not just an idea. There's like a force to it. There's a spiritual living force, as I see it. And there are some different like psychologists and spiritual people that did research on archetypes, and they can be very powerful. So like when I was about 12 years old, I saw the Rocky movies for the first time, and I loved Rocky. There was all these other movies, like I guess feminist. I never got into that. I'm like, I don't care about any of that. I love Rocky. And I felt like, because I felt like he reflected back to me my own true essential nature. I felt like this person who's refusing to give up, who refuses to stop fighting. I'm like, I'm already like that. I have that in me. So and the eye of the tiger is this mindset of this single-minded focus to achieve a goal. And for entrepreneurs, that's critical, that single-minded focus, and military as well. Um, and so like Rocky was the reason I started to work out. He was the reason I started to run track. And even later when I was building my health and fitness business, still that archetype was almost like a guardian angel watching over me, making sure I move in the right direction. So I wanted to ask you, because you're a serial entrepreneur, you're very successful, what archetype would you say you attribute a lot of your success to?
I thought a lot about this question when you sent it over to me, and I'm finding it hard to get an answer, to be honest. For me, I think the lack of an archetype is probably why my success was delayed, to be honest. So I came through my teens and, lived in a small town in, what not rural Australia, but just a small town in just anywhere Australia. Had some great mates, but without that sort of driving role model, or driving force, I pretty well just bumbled around, to be honest. And I feel like I've always come to the party, well, not a little bit late, but I'm definitely not early. So I started 3 university degrees, didn't finish any of them, was rather unspectacular at nearly everything I tried. Like good, but not spectacular. No, good at everything, but never really cracked that level of like elite in sport or elite at school. And that sort of led me to a point in my 20s where I was just really like, in terms of cruising around, I literally bought a caravan and went fruit picking for 2 years. So literally, and I literally picked fruit. And then a lot of my career before I hit the military was on farms, and I was a laborer. So I walked around, I did whatever job was on the farm, picking fruit, picking flowers, planting things, whatever. And it was only, but I always had I guess, a latent sense of self-belief and unfulfilled achievement. And it wasn't until I went to the military, I signed up at 29 and joined at 30. So, and most of my peers were like in their 18s and 19s. And this is what I mean, a little bit late to the party. So I joined the army at 30, got out at about 42, had kids, at around 40, and had started my entrepreneurial life at about 39, 40 as I was transitioning from the army. So when I look at someone like yourself who had that strong, driving force, had I have had that, I think I would be at least 15 years ahead of where I am. Now, I don't regret the journey because, the journey has made me who I am and the experiences have got me there. But for me, I wish I had it, to be honest. I was trying to, before I came on, I was trying to pluck something out of the air in terms of who that person could be. But ultimately, it was a delayed, unfulfilled personal goal setting that I managed. The military actually pulled my socks up. And to be honest, I was heavily into smoking marijuana for many years before I joined the army. And it was probably what delayed me getting into the army. So, just cruising around. And by the time I got, I didn't tick that form on the entry form that, hey, have you ever done this before? I wasn't going to tick that box because I wouldn't have even got in. But once I got in, that collective force, the collective ability to be able to achieve your potential and drive, to where you want to be, that actually gave me the ability and the confidence that when I left, I had the slingshot to do things by myself. So yeah, it's
That's really interesting.
yeah.
Peter, I think that people need archetypes. A
Mm,
lot of people used to get those archetypes from religion, different deities,
yeah.
different angels, different saints, and we lost that. I mean, some people still have that, but collectively, I think we lost that. We moved into modernity, and modernity didn't give us very powerful archetypes. That's why I think people worship celebrity, because people require some force greater than themselves to look up to, and both men and women need them. And I think when I was growing up, I didn't see any female archetypes that I resonated with. That's why Rocky was was my guy, because he
Yeah.
was like, well, that's the closest thing to what I feel that I am, and to this day, there aren't really that many female archetypes that, other than the Sacred Mother, like the Mother of God. But it's like that's a tall order to try to be like that.
If I can share something really cool that happened to me last summer. Last year in Australia, we had the Women's Football World Cup or Soccer World Cup. And the Australian women's football team are called the Matildas. And we were one of the like favorites to get in there. I know that, is it called the USWNT or something like that? Women's soccer in America is pretty strong. So, the Australians were really one of the favorites. And we were hosting the World Cup at home. And the nation really got behind the team to the point that we were watching all the games and we were, as a family, getting up and cheering. And a really cool moment happened because I've got two boys that are, 8 and 6. And there was a couple of, that had their friends over. And the boys were like, I want to be Mary Fowler or I want to be Sam Kerr. And it was just a really cool moment for me to see young boys emulating these amazing women. And, like instead of like, I want to be Michael Jordan or a football player or something like that, that they were like arguing over who should be Sam Kerr or, you know, um, it was just really, really cool to see. And one of the things like sport and, in your space with health and fitness, uh, young women, in all of the sports in Australia that were categorically, probably men only, like cricket, rugby league, Australian football. We now have professional leagues for women's sport. So I'm hoping that for the next generation of women or young girls in Australia coming through, that they can find some of those strong, powerful, archetypes, that represent who they are.
I hope so. And that kind of brings me to the next question I wanted to ask you. This is a really, really complicated topic, and I don't want to offend anybody, so nobody, nobody take offense, but we're just going to talk about this because I think about this a lot. Um, there's all these studies done on how do men and women work together. We figured out we can. How do men and
Yeah.
men work together? Fine. How do women and women work together? So I'm not bashing anybody, but I want to understand how women can work together because, like, so Solomon in the Bible is known to say a wise woman builds up a house with her hands and tears it down with her mouth. And in
Yeah.
my personal experience, women tend to cause a lot of problems with their mouths. They will trash talk, they'll gossip, they will, spend a lot of time, talking about nonsense. And I'll just give you a simple example, a little story from my life. I used to really I used to study spirituality, all kinds of spiritualities, all the time for years. And at some point, here in New York City, it's pretty loud, it's noisy, it's a big city. So and I had regular office jobs before I started my business. I had regular office jobs like banks, real estate, and things like that, all practical stuff. And in those offices, typically there were lots of I was doing admin work, there were lots of women, and they would just talk all day. And I'm like, I'm kind of a silent contemplative by nature. I actually went to a silent contemplative monastery to escape the nightmare. And I was there for probably a total of 60 to 90 days. I don't remember exactly. I loved it. And for people who don't know what that is, it's like it was in nature, and it was a monastery where the monks and the nuns would take like an ascetic vow of silence, where essentially the idea is you only devote yourself to God. So you pray or you talk to God all day and you don't talk to other people. That sounds really probably crazy and extreme, but some people it's healing. For some people, it's healing for their
Mm.
soul. And I found that for me, that was a very, very uniquely healing experience because it just allowed so much mental clarity. All the trash, all the mental trash that accumulates, is just there was finally a chance to take it all out and just to experience just this clear connection with source and the sacred. And I seriously considered just staying there, but I'm like, well, but I want to be of service in the world. So I came back to one of these real estate jobs, where I was at. And it's like the shock of coming from 60 days of silence and contemplation in nature, just beauty, and into, an office full of women who are talking nonstop about basically bullshit. And it was like a realm of hell for me. Like, and I have a lot of guy friends. I've always had a lot of guy friends, and no offense to anybody, but a lot of them say this is why they don't want to work with women because women just won't STFU in their words. And that's what they say. So my question to you is, um, at the same time, I've met lots of professional, wonderful, positive, healthy women who can work together with other women. But I don't think they're that competitive. I think they tend to be more in smaller areas where it's not such a fast-paced competitive world like it is here in a big city. But I know you've had a lot of experience working with all kinds of people, men and women in the military and outside of the military. So what would you say? How can women work together, considering all these problems?
Yeah, look, it's funny you mentioned that because in my experiences, particularly in the military, the the women were treated pretty closely to being equal, and but what I mean by that in terms of the physical challenges, like they still had to carry the same weight as everybody else. If you want to pass any of the particular courses, you've got to do the same stuff as the guys. So there was, I felt, minimal, differences between the way they were taught, and in an environment where it is, at least 85 to 90% men, you know, the women that I worked with there held their own with aplomb, and some of the bosses that I've had who have been female have actually been some of the best bosses that I've had because they were able to bring a little bit of a softer, compassionate side to the discussion. They still had all the power and the authority of rank, But sometimes I feel that in the military, men, for example, would use that power and authority and release it through sometimes anger in the way that they would, you know, it's like, because in the army, it's for some reason, well, it's okay to be angry at subordinates if they do something wrong. And it's very, can be very dominating and controlling the way that, the way that things are shared. Then you can break people down and give them your direction very, very clearly and very, very strongly, and release some frustration, like things that aren't acceptable in the civilian world. And I'm not saying that's wrong either, because it's a different environment, and it's also a very historical environment that those traits have come through thousands of years of generation from army and army. The way that people treat each other. But some of the women that I've worked with have just been uh, just absolutely held their own. And I guess my only other really reflection on that is to use my wife's example. She was working in a US pharmaceutical company, and the reverse was actually the case, where that company was 90% women. Now, what I saw in, like, as looking in to that, looking through the window at that organization, they were all very committed, very team orientated, very caring and passionate people in their trades, very intelligent, very articulate, and very, very clever, to be able to have the science background to be able to deliver the work they needed to do for the pharmaceutical company. And for that, it was almost the flip from the military, particularly in terms of the percentages, in terms of the numbers. But from an organizational perspective, the way that they worked as a team was super strong. And I think this is where, to answer your point about how we see people working together, strong teams based on common purpose and a common end state is what drives you to that next level of performance. So regardless of whether you're male or female, if you're within a business or an entity, if you're creating a collective or a collaborative versus a competitive environment, then you've got an ability to bring people on a common momentum, achieve a common goal. And hopefully that will remove some of the, let's say, the narkiness out of gossip or what might happen, because they're collectively invested in achieving something together.
I think that's a great, great point. Having common goals. I think that's the only way any kind of relationship can work. You have to have mutual goals that you 100% agree on. Otherwise, you're going to go in different directions, right? So
And that just removes the men versus women thing, because there was time, the different elements of the army had far higher percentages of female, like particularly in the logistics trades. Like a lot of the war fighting was like even like 98, 99% male. But I've never really, I've been lucky enough not to see it in particularly my military career, as well as my business career afterward. I've only been, blessed to have some very intelligent and high performing women that are driven from their own momentum. And when we bring their momentum into our community and we give them a common goal, then collectively it's the old 1+1 = 3.
very interesting. So you were talking about the women in the military. I'm obviously not in the military, but I consider myself a spiritual warrior. I have, I come from a traditional military family. I didn't go into the military because I had a lot of health issues, but if I didn't, I think I would have. Knowing myself, I probably would have gone straight into the military. And then maybe I wouldn't have learned all this like spiritual stuff. So there's a purpose for everything. But a lot of people who have worked for me, they say I'm the nicest boss they've ever had. And sometimes, and I think that's good, but I wonder if, like, I have a lot of discipline in my life. I work much better when I have a very stringent level of discipline. Like my diet is super strict. I don't know anyone who would want my diet because it's so strict, but I love it. I love the discipline. And but I wonder if I am not sufficiently strict with the people that work under me in order to motivate them more, get more results. Maybe I'm too nice. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's an interesting one, because for me, my ability to give very definitive direction, and like in the military, we call them orders. And an order is like, do what you're told to do. It's like, There's no ifs or buts. This is your order. Go and do it. And in the military, I found that it was very easy for me to give orders because I was a part of a collective force that I understood what my boss needed to achieve. And then I was able to take their intent and create my own orders so that my team could achieve what my boss wanted and what my boss's boss wanted. Okay, so it's a little bit more challenging when I come into business because number one, the facade of rank and the facade of ego that comes with rank and authority is removed. Yeah, but technically, we could say, yeah, CEO, co-founder, whatever terms, that sort of rank is still there, but it's not as dominant as in the military when you've got like legal force and all of that behind you. And I actually find that for me, being an officer, coming from being a farmer before I joined the army, a lot of my personal nature was facaded a little bit as an officer because I had the authority of rank, and it wasn't my natural being to be so forceful to demand what I want. So it was very easy for me to do that in that environment. Now, come to business, I hope that so now that I'm out of the military and I'm just a normal civilian again, I'm able to revert back into the hopefully just normal, nicer person that I was without the facade of the structure and the power. And I struggle with it as well a little bit, in terms of the balance between in my teams, how do I give them clear direction and exactly what I want, but I don't have the tools. Sorry, that's maybe not the right term. I don't have the authority, or I don't want to be like I was in the military, where I just do as I say it, because I've got the rank and authority for you to just do as you're told. I've now got to craft a whole different set of techniques and ways to get the best out of my teams, because ultimately they can just quit, or they can just infect the business with presenteeism instead of having emotion and energy and passion into where we're going. So on that perspective, I think fundamentally to come a long way around to answer your question, you've got to be bound to your true self. And if you try to be something you're not, again, that word facade will come to the fore and people will see right through you. I think a better way, so one of the things that I always do when it comes to guiding and counseling my teams is I always reflect on process. So process and systems first before people. It's like that saying, play the ball, not the man in sport. Okay, so what we want to be able to do is one of the things I always talk about, there is no people problem in a business until you fix a systems problem first. Okay, but then when you fix the systems problem, it becomes a performance appraisal problem. So if something comes up with your team and you're really struggling to say, look, why isn't this getting done, or why aren't they performing in this way? Sit back and reflect and think, well, have I set them up for success by giving them the structure to succeed? Have I built the systems and processes in place to allow them to perform at their optimum? And focus on that first. And that's the playing the ball, not the man. That's not pointing fingers about, hey, look, you haven't done a great job here. You need to do better. It's like, well, if we only put in the structure and guidance, and then you launch that new system and you work together to build the new system, but once it's enforced, so once it's launched, I say, then you have to enforce it. And that's when it becomes a performance appraisal issue. And then you can get into counseling and guiding people and performance managing them after you've fixed a systems problem.
That makes total sense. Well, in speaking of the systems, again, I feel like my own work is very systematized, but it's not necessarily scalable or replicatable because I put so much love into what I do. I can't necessarily, have my people have the same amount of love for my business or our cause. Some do, and I actually had a person who was a client for 7 years, and he totally joined the cause. We have the same level of love because we both realized that if we didn't have this, we would be dead. It's life or death, and that's
Yeah.
why we are so devoted to it. But like a regular, let's say, virtual assistant or a regular person coming in, they may be able to follow the systems, but they don't necessarily have the love. And I used to think maybe it doesn't matter, but I think maybe it does because my clients are also attracted to the love and the passion around these things. And so it's like, how do you scale the love?
It's interesting, and this is super important and challenging as a business owner. And when we need to look at, what are the must-haves that you pay, the raw paying conditions that you've got to pay people. So you've got to pay them, a minimum wage, and then whatever the legal extras are, like insurances or anything like that. So they've got their core entitlements that you've got to give people. But I had one of my team members recently come up to me and he said, Pete, I've been offered another job, and it's a lot more money. And my first thoughts to him were like, well, congratulations, mate. That is so fantastic. I'm really happy for you. That was my first instant thought was, and I cannot pay him what that other person is. In terms of the role, it's just not feasible. Um, but he said, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay with you guys. And I was like, well, why? Why are you doing that? And he goes, because this is the first business that I've ever felt special in my life. Okay, so from that perspective, how he's never been made to feel like that he's been trusted, and he's in a position of leadership where he has a team that he's mentoring and he looks after. So I can't offer him as much money as this other company does. Hopefully, as collectively we grow in a business and as we move from 200 staff to 1,000 staff, I will honor that loyalty. And my pure dream and hope is that these people that are on the journey with me early, then I can overtly reward them in the long run. It's just not feasible to do in the short run. But what I can do is say, what's everything else outside of your basic entitlements that creates a community, a sense of purpose? And funny enough, I went to the Philippines maybe about a month ago, and I got our leadership team together, and on a big whiteboard, love a good whiteboard, we wrote down, I just wrote on the top there, what matters to you? Okay. And the, to summarize quickly, the money was maybe one out of 20 different things that matter to people. Okay. Yes. But the money's super important. We can't deny the money's important, but there were 19 other things on that board that I could contribute to that do a lot more cost effective, to be honest. And some of them were even didn't cost me anything. Little things like giving team members different status between, like the McDonald's employee of the month thing. Now, that doesn't really cost anything, but it's acknowledging performance, and it's bringing a sense of community and collective direction into where we're going. Because again, this is the thing with my business as well, coming back to your passion versus profit at the start, and everything that you're talking, this whole conversation, I'm just seeing the profit and the passion infused through, why we're doing things here. For me, yes, I co-own the business, but I want it to be something that collectively all my team has a sense of ownership of, in terms of why are they here? Why do they turn up every day? Not only for the money. I don't know where I was going. I can't even remember the question you answered before I
No,
went down that
I think
particular.
everything you said makes sense. It's got to make sense to them. It's like tapping into what makes sense for them, what makes them feel special or what they love, and
Yeah.
tying that into the collective business goal or your goal. And
Yeah.
so I totally get it.
Yeah. And look, I think to be honest, with you would have been great in the military, particularly, I will admit, a lot of people look at the military and they think, oh, it's very disciplined and that kind of stuff. It's collective discipline. And for the people like yourself that have personal discipline, that is more powerful, and you should take probably more pride in that for your own sense of purpose and sense of, control, that self-discipline and the things that you achieve on a daily basis, whether it be, your fitness and your diet regimes, are far more powerful than anything I achieve with a collective discipline, because I had to train and work out every single day, and I was super fit because I had to be there as part of the group. Now, I'll admit that when I've left the military, it's more of a challenge to me to have individual discipline than it is to have collective discipline.
Interesting. I think I'm the reverse. I've always been extremely self-determined, self-organized, self-disciplined. Like a lot of the things I kind of notice that I find things on my own, I'm doing them, and then like 10 years later, I see kind of the collective doing it. I kind of feel like I'm, for some reason, a little bit ahead of the game, but that's because I do a lot of things on my own. I just go there, and there's pros and cons to that. But so for me, it's a little bit like, to me, discipline, and I'm not talking about beating, like I'm talking about discipline, structure, organization, timeliness, like very clear, organized mindedness. To me, that's a form of love. When I have that in my life, and my I've always had a lot of male mentors and coaches, and I loved the level of discipline they were bringing into the training. I always felt that was a form of love. But I only maybe in the last, I don't know, 4 years understood that other people want that from me. They want that kind of leadership from me. They want me to create discipline for them. And I'm trying to learn how to do that um, in a way that creates a step-by-step process, because I realized in working with other people that they never had the level of discipline that's my normal. Just
Absolutely. And
to
you,
bring them even
you
up to
mentioned
like half of it is like a lot of work.
you mentioned something really at the start, being the archetype or the role model. And it's not for me to ask you questions, or this is your show. But for me, what you're able to bring to people in your business is, don't discount your own level of being that role model or that example for other people, because you are so uh, let's say blessed to be, this is who you are and this is the way you do it. And we talked about, recently, about being nice versus, how do you being too nice as a boss. You can just keep doing what you're doing in terms of your being a role model, and people will flock to you in terms of being the example. Now, your systems and structures and all of that, and your processes and all of that, how you can continue to be true to your own nature and be nice by focusing on, and just going back to my point before, whenever I find a problem in the business or I find a problem with someone's performance, 90% of the time, it's because of a system or a process problem. It is very rare for me to actually find, problems where people are intentionally meaning to do the wrong thing. Sometimes it's because people are tired and exhausted and have lost momentum, and they basically need a rest, particularly at this time of the year. And I've got an example yesterday where a guy's performance is like, slipped off, and he's being paid well for that. But I was like, he's exhausted. So instead of, overly counseling or correcting him on the performance, we're a day off Christmas break. So it's like, mate, just get through tomorrow, have a great rest with your family. Let's come back and hit it in the new year. So I think for yourself is, I can see you elevating yourself into being that, that example or that role model that people need to follow. So just stick to it, be true to it.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, I appreciate you saying that. And it's interesting you say that you kind of like had a heart-centered approach rather than a punitive approach to his a lack of performance. I kind of am leaning always towards that too. So
Yeah.
I know how much, for example, people need supplements, right? They need vitamin C and and D, and they can't live without them. So at some point when, my one of the people that worked with me, she was always getting sick. I just bought her supplements. I'm like, this is your bonus. Just you can't live without this. So and then she got better and she returned to performance. But it's like, so I'm always like that. And that's why sometimes I wonder if I'm too nice. Not that I don't think that was too nice, but I do that a lot, you know. So
Yeah. One of the tools, and again, this is a tool straight out of the army, is as a young lieutenant or lieutenant, you call it in the States, we used to have what's called a platoon commander's notebook. And you would meet with all of your team at least once a month, and you just take a couple of notes, right? And in those notes, they gave you what's the term? Contemporary, contemporariness. I can't even say the word. But there's when you take notes on people and you create like a file of the conversations that you have, when it comes time to actually formally counseling with them, you'll be able to say, look, we spoke about it at this point. We spoke about it at this point. Now it's the time I need to give you a formal warning. So you need to have those structures in place, because It is always a carrot and the stick approach. And what we don't want to do is have too much heart and not enough, authority, because you
That's what
need the business.
that's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering about. I think I need a
yeah,
little more of that, but I still want to be heart-centered about it, and that's the challenge.
yeah. So, but what the risk here is that we are so heart centered to the point where we leave that relationship in frustration and anger because we haven't managed it. So it'll be heart, 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 heart. And then be like, hey, I'm pissed now, I've got the shits. And then it's like, you're done. I'm sick of you. I'll sack you. So being able to have the courage, the moral courage to guide and counsel along the way just takes off the table the possibility of losing that relationship again, because some relationships end and they have a natural progression. One of our senior team members left the business only a month ago because he found an amazing job that was, in sports. He'd been in sports before he came to us. He worked with us for 3 years, came to us during the pandemic when he lost his job. Now he's got an amazing job back in sports. That's just the natural cycle of the relationship here. So taking notes, and I'm taking notes on realistic conversations with your team so that you can bank this file of contemporaneous notes, if I think that's the term, so that when it comes time to formal counseling, you've got some kind of reference point that says, hey, look, we spoke about this on here. I took a heart-led approach. We spoke about again here, and again, I gave you the benefit of the doubt. But now it's time that I really need you to take action on here. And I'm going to give you a couple of weeks/months to sort it out. And then we're going to talk about it again. If things don't change, then it might be just a natural sign that we're not right for each other here. And that's okay as well.
So
So
basically, you
you can
have to be
still,
very honest. You have to be very
yeah,
honest and point out there's a failure here. You can't sugarcoat
yeah, that's right. And you have to have that level of courage, which can be very intimidating. But ultimately, it is an investment in that person, an investment in yourself, because if you don't have that courage, the chances of it ending in an explosion of frustration and anger later down the track and losing that relationship is, I think you're at far greater risk of that.
That's a really good point. I dare to say that it works just like that in relationships, in other relationships. You have to
Oh,
tell the
100%.
person, you failed here. Sorry, but you did.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
And
unacceptable.
and
Yeah.
God forbid to even have the courage to listen and to hear someone say that we fail. So in our business, we have a frank and fearless, feedback with empathy as one of our core values. And it's super challenging, to be honest, as one of the founders and leadership in the team is to be. Our team is allowed to tell us when we make mistakes, but they've got to do it with empathy. I used to say initially, I used to say frank and fearless feedback with respect, but sometimes respect can be. It's not enough because you can say things with respect, but still be too firm. When you say it with empathy, you are allowed to give your guidance and feedback, but you say it from the heart perspective, and we understand what we're about to say, what that effect is that's going to have on that person as well, not just being too blunt about it. So there
Absolutely.
is ways that you can blend your style, and just there's ways that you can blend this heart-led approach into having a successful business for sure.
I think so, and I think that this discussion about failure, I think it's really important because as entrepreneurs, we fail a lot, and we have to be so honest about it, because otherwise we just can't. We're not going to succeed if we're not honest when we failed. So yeah.
Absolutely. We have to and I think one thing that the US does better than Australia is acknowledges this sense of uh, failure as a part of success. In Australia, I think we still try to be a little bit too, macho. And if you go out to like a Christmas party, how's business? Oh, everything's fine. We're doing great. Like sometimes business isn't fine. Sometimes business is really tough, and sometimes there's peaks and troughs. So that ultimate acceptance of failure is part of. But we're going back to that. Failure is critical as part of learning, but the key word there is learning. And learning is about adaptation, and learning is about development. And this is going back to the military. one of the things that we've implemented in our business straight out of the military is an after action review. So, for example, one of my team will listen to this one day, and I'll ask them for frank and fearless feedback about my performance here. And to do an after action review on anything in business, it's super easy. Sustain, improve, and fix. Right. So, sustain. What did I do well that I should keep doing that again? What are the things I need to improve? Um, and what are the things that I did wrong that I need to fix? And if you can take that sense of humbleness into doing quick feedback from your team, hey, what did I do well? What can I improve? What can I do better? We can rapidly learn and we can rapidly do better. And that is straight out of Military 101.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have maybe about 1 more minute. I know you got to run, but I wanted to ask you if someone is listening to this and they're a brand new solopreneur, they got lots of passion and they want to build a business with passion, but they realize they need systems, structures, people. What is the one thing that you can tell them to like help them to stay the course?
Excellent. Really good question. Adopt the work hard once mentality. Okay, there's what you need to do here is you will either grind and work hard every single day doing the same things, or you can adopt a work hard once mentality where you understand that I need to work hard, really hard right now to develop systems and processes. All right. But when you develop those systems and processes, they are the way that ultimately one day you'll be able to delegate things away from you. So we've got to get away from us doing everything to a reflection of things being done our way. And the simplest and fastest way that anyone can do that in business is just get some screen recording software, loom.com, Zoom, whatever, and just capture what you do on a screen and file it. Okay, so next time you do a membership onboarding, just hit record. Hey, this is how we do a membership recording. ABC, 1, 2, 3, XYZ, bang. It takes 20, 30 seconds, and you don't need to dedicate new time to do it. You actually just do it when you're doing it. Then you start banking this library of how-to guides or procedures. So when you get your first team member on, it might be something local, it might be a virtual assistant offshore, but now you've got your library of things to get things done your way. So we get them done your way. So that'd be my first bit. Work hard once to create that library of how-to guides so that when you get a team member, you've got something that they can look at and move. It's not going to take so much of your time to train and teach them.
I love that so much. Thank you. This was so unbelievably helpful. I would love to have you back on one day when you
Please,
have time.
absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome. So, there's so many more questions I want to ask you, but I know you got to run. So again, thank you so much. And maybe like in a month or two, we can talk
Yeah,
again.
I really love that. I really love that. So anyone can touch base with me on LinkedIn. You know, we're at Peter at trusttheprocess.com.au. Happy to chat with anybody and connect with anyone. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. And I'll post in the description links to your websites and where people can reach you
Perfect.
and hire you. Okay, awesome.
Always a pleasure, Ariel.
You too, very much so. Have an amazing night. Bye.
Bye.